Welcome to Cyber Sentries from Paladin Cloud on True Story FM. I'm your host, John Richards. Here we explore the transformative potential of AI for cloud security. Our sponsor, Paladin Cloud, is an AI-powered prioritization engine for cloud security. Check them out at paladincloud.io. I'm excited to be joined by Tim Youngblood. He was CISO at 4 Fortune 500 companies and is currently CISO in residence at Astrix. In our conversation, we explore how adaptability is a crucial trait for CISOs, especially in the face of emerging threats like AI. However, digital security has never been static. It's a constant battle against an evolving landscape of dangers. From an infamous McFlurry API DDoS attack to defending against non-human identity threats. We cover it all in today's episode. Let's dive in. Hello there, Tim Youngblood. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm super excited to get to talk to you today. I've heard so much about you from Steve, who was a coworker of yours. I know your background is incredibly impressive. 4 times you've been CISO at Fortune 500 companies. You're currently the CISO in residence at Astrix Security. Thank you so much for coming on here. I'm excited to hear more about you.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. Yeah, 4-time CISO for big brands just means I never learned my lesson. I just kept coming back over and over again. I think I finally got there, at least getting out of operational roles. But like you said, I've been the CISO for Dell, Kimberly Clark Corporation, McDonald's, and T-Mobile.
Wow.
I was Dell's first CISO. I helped create that job there. And
how do you get into a spot like that? Like what led up to you creating a role there at Dell?
That was definitely over a series of years to get to that point, because I first came on to Dell to help them get out of a compliance hole. And when I first joined Dell, they had 100% failure in every IT control during like one of the first cycles of SOX that they went through back then. And so I was greeted by some pretty pissed off auditors, right? Because people, giving IT policy to auditors and saying, hey, we do this when they did nothing of the sort, right? So, I had to fix that. And then I eventually took over risk management, IT risk management, created that. It was really the first formal risk department for the company. And, then took over a lot of the other compliance spaces. And then the security organization was very organically built. It just came up over time and it was disparate. And, they finally realized they needed some structure to it. And, I was the man standing, right? So I was there to give it all the attention and the strategy and the direction it needed to become a real cybersecurity department. And I think when I left Dell, there was, I had built it to about 124 people or so, which at that time was big. I know right now it's about 800 people in the security department at Dell.
Was it a challenge to get that level, like the buy-in that this needs to be a role at the C-suite level? Because I assume security was there before, it just didn't have the visibility that was needed.
So true. It was very much buried down in infrastructure. No one really paid that much attention to it. In fact, when I came on board, I was a big champion for more security because it helped me on the compliance side, right? So, and my background was in security. But the funny thing is, I had no intentions on, being the CISO. In fact, I didn't want to. And, but I think, we had a few little minor incidents that popped up and it started to become a more reality. And I think it was really, some external forces that put pressure to kind of say, hey, you need to formalize this. You're one of the Fortune 50 company in the world, top 4 internet presidents. How can you not have a leader over security? And
Yes.
so, and then, Michael came back and started buying companies. And one of the companies he bought was a security company, SecureWorks. And it was right before that I got named the CISO for Dell.
Was it a challenge then to integrate in this external team?
Yes, that was always a challenge because, at that time, we were buying 8 to 12 companies a year, and they were, generally small companies of, 100 to 200 people that executed really well on some certain type of capability that was important, to the bigger structure of Dell. But they were in no way ready to take on all the requirements that an entity the size and scale of Dell had to. And so you had to be really careful about how you integrated in with them so that you didn't crush them totally. And that was one thing Michael was very adamant about, is that, hey, I bought this for a reason. I need this to be able to continue to operate for this reason. And so, you had to establish these kind of, golden curtains where, okay, you can do this side what you want to on the curtain. On this side of the curtain, you can only do these things, right? So there's a lot of swiveling between computers that used to go on.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because the acquisition brings up challenges on both sides. You don't want to overwhelm them, but from a security perspective, when you are dealing with acquisitions, it's a whole other ball game because you if you're doing security for one large company, at least you kind of know that company, you know the people. But as you acquire something, being able to say, I don't know what this is, how do I get that in line? Did you have to do work around, like, how, as you were acquiring these 8 companies a year or so, how you bring them inside of a functioning CISO organization?
Yeah, you definitely. There was this thing, I called poverty level controls, right? These are the things in order to be in business, you must have these things. They must be operating. It doesn't have to be a certain type or a certain solution, but you have to have something that addresses this. And, as long as you're reaching poverty level controls, then I can work with you on the other stuff, right? And so it was getting a lot of those companies, who had been, running like startups do on shoestring budgets and, just making stuff work and getting them to at least up to a stature that, okay, you're now, you're part of a Fortune, 50 company that has SEC requirements, PCI requirements, ISO requirements. And, if you're part of this environment and you have access to these things, then you have to also have these controls, right? And so until you're ready for these controls, you're going to at least be able to protect the brand, that you have to do that regardless because you're tied to Dell now, right?
Yes, for sure. So, as you look at as you started to progress at being a CISO at some of these other companies, did you find that the challenges were unique to each organization? I'm sure part of them were, but like, how much were unique challenges, and how much are CISO challenges kind of global? Like as you go across companies, it's just there's a couple details, but things are the same.
As you acquired companies, yeah, it was different because it was interesting. We acquired Sonic Wall, if you remember that, the firewall, network security company, which was very different than Quest, the software company that, we had acquired. And, the interesting part about it, no matter who we acquired, they automatically wanted to, have Dell use their product to say Dell uses their product, which,
Of course.
initially it was called, eat your own dog food, but now I was like, how about we call it drink your own champagne? That sounds a little
Yes.
But even in that, you just, there were some that, they targeted, SMB, mid market. They were not ready for, something at the scale of the enterprise of Dell. And so we had to, of course, make some decisions on things that didn't make sense for it to be part of the ecosystem. Or if it was, it'd be, part of a smaller business unit so they could say they were, part of Dell, but, you know, be realistic that, you could be part of everything. And so like, each company had its own little quirks and, Some were more ready to be integrated into the full back office and others that weren't. We had policies, that we would establish because a lot of these companies didn't have policies, and we put those on them, and they realized, hey, you have to do business slightly differently, but we don't want to do things that completely kill or destroy your innovation. But, you can't use Gmail as your primary email account anymore, right? You can just, connect, your PS5 to the network anymore. I mean, those days, they're gone, right? There's no more LAN parties, like those guys. So, and most understood that. It was always resistant to change, but you tried, at least for me, I tried to be sensitive to the fact because I came from the startup world too. I've been in that situation, and there were things that made the company special. You tried to, and you have to use, when you're a CISO, you can use your business acumen skills quite a bit more than your technology skills, just to get people on board.
There's a lot of change management in that, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. Tons of change management. And, regardless, a lot of people didn't realize when they took on the job of a CISO that you became a salesperson too. Right? Sell your ideas, and you have to get people to believe wow, it's great. Or, convince them that it's their idea, right? So, and I would love to listen to some of these companies we had acquired and, how they solved the problem. And sometimes they actually solved it better than we did. So.
Love it. So how did what you learned there impact as you went on to your next CISO role, whether that was T-Mobile or McDonald's?
That was, Kimberly Clark Corporation was my next CISO role. And that was different industry, of course, manufacturing, CPG company, but still some of the same type of challenges. Because I don't know if you've ever dealt with a general manager, GM of a manufacturing plant, but that's like their own little company, right? And, and Kimberly Clark had 250 around the globe, and there's nothing you will tell a GM that will make them do something they don't want to do. Not even the CEO coming out, because they feel like, hey, this is my domain. My whole life is all about getting product out the door, and anything that gets in the way of that, I ignore it, right? So
you really had to exercise those sales muscles then if you're trying to get them on board.
Definitely. But, that was good because Kimberly Clark's situation was different because literally I came in and they had not invested anything in security for decades. And it was like building from the ground up. And I definitely took more of a route of, rallying everyone around the purpose of security and how it made their lives better. In fact, our security awareness was tagline, protect KC and me. So we would do things that would be helpful for not just the company, but for the employee. So I bought antivirus for the whole company and said, here, you can use 5 licenses at home, right? And protect yourself at home, right? If you're safer at home, you'll probably be safer at work.
And, you're building that culture. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a trust game. People start to trust you. Then, it's interesting. I would be in elevators and people will come up to me like, hey, what else can I do to help you guys out? I want to make sure we're successful. It's like, that's what I'm talking about, right? It's not just the security team out here doing it by themselves. We're all in this together.
Yeah, well, it's too often I hear of antagonistic relationships where I'm trying to get a job done and the security team wants to keep me from doing it. But if you can get that to where you understand, no, we're collaborating, security is here to help me, so I'm safe in doing my job, then it's a much better relationship for everybody, and people will be more secure because they're happy to, follow the rules that are keeping them safe.
Yeah. And then for me, it's always been the situation where, these are choices, right? I'm here. My job is to identify the choices in front of us and help you select the choice that's best for the company, right? Not best for me, but best for the company. And sometimes it's going to mean taking on more risk. And other times it's going to mean we need to, maybe not go in that direction because it's detrimental to the whole company.
Yeah, no, really letting folks know the context there, I think is important. A lot of times they're told what to do. And there's no why or reason. And then, people are like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. Does it even matter? But when you know why, you're like, I feel like I'm a little more invested in that.
Right. Well, and I as someone who you know, I came up from being a developer. I was a developer, so I was on that ops side. I transitioned into doing, LANs and WANs. So I was actually a big Cisco guy. I had all the certifications of deploying networks all over the country, and then that got me into, kind of project management and then IT director leadership. So I know what it takes to kind of run an operation. So that I very different than like, some of our peers who just came up in security and that's all they know, right?
Yes. It's a little bit like they say, if you should always, do the service level role. It's a little bit like that on the security side, like be somebody who had to deal with those policies and understand,
Oh,
the
it'll open
strength
your eyes.
communication.
You probably heard about that series, Undercover Boss. Where they come in and they actually.
Yes.
And when I was at McDonald's, very similar experience where every executive in the company, when I was there, had to work in a McDonald's for a period of time.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So you'd have to go in and you'd have to learn how to work the fry machine and, you'd be cleaning bathrooms, and you just like your eyes open up on like, wow, the things that I asked them to do from corporate, what the impact is to them, right? And so you have a greater appreciation for, changes that you make and then, how you, can make their lives better, which actually helps the company.
I was told to ask you about some. Did you have any wild stories from your time at McDonald's around security of things that happened? Steve mentioned a McFlurry's story or
Oh
something
yeah,
here.
yeah.
If you can share.
McDonald's. It's interesting. McDonald's is, of course, one of the largest companies in the world. I think the McDonald's emblem is like is known at the same equivalency rate as the crucifix. Which is crazy to think about it, but it's they've done studies on that.
Yeah,
Everybody
those golden arches.
yeah, so, for a company that is, in 80 or 90 countries, there's a lot of different things that go on from a security perspective. And the model that McDonald's has, which is more owner operator, joint licenses. So you've got a lot of companies that, they own the McDonald's brand, but they don't know necessarily all the things that are required to meet an expectation for security. Right. And that's one of the yeah, my part of my job was getting them on board. Like, hey, I know you're operating a company. Like, for example, you may have this sheik in that's in the Middle East, and he owns 100 McDonald's, and he owns gas stations and grocery stores too, right? But he's running that as kind of one business, but the McDonald's side, okay, there's a certain standard of expectations on how you're going to run that restaurant to keep it safe, and I need to make sure that you've got those things in place. And so my job is to come in and help you, figure out where you've got gaps, and then things that you need to invest in to make sure that you get better. And it's amazing to me what I learned, what people do to try to get a free meal. and, I mean, people who would go and hack the kiosk machines and, figure out how to like, they would select, buns and a meat, and then, take the meat out, and then they figure out, oh, it's a free sandwich now. If I take the meat out, then I can put it back in, and they just, social engineer around everything, digital menu boards. We had, folks that would go in and hack into the digital menu boards and like, throw up their favorite, world-class soccer game or something in the middle of a restaurant, or other things that shouldn't be shown up on a digital menu board. And then the flurry machine was the interesting part. We had a kid in Germany, and his purpose was to try to find, okay, where are the ice cream machines that are actually working in my area in Germany, right? So that was his initial purpose. Like he just wanted to figure out. So he figured out how to hack an API out of the global mobile app to show him what machines were working and not working, and created a website over that. Well, within a day or two, it ended up creating kind of denial of service attack across the entire
Oh no!
ecosystem, and crashing the global mobile app that hundreds of thousands of people used every day, right? So interesting day in McDonald's every day, I would say.
I bet, and it's fascinating because those are not, you know, those are challenges I would never expect. I'm like, oh, CISO there, you're just worried about like regular technical challenges and what the technical teams are developing, but you're talking about store level access. And how do you stay flexible enough to handle what's being thrown at you? This isn't I'm coming in tomorrow and it's just going to be the same thing, a little bit different. Like, you're getting constantly new challenges thrown your way. How do you stay prepared to handle that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it's partnerships is a big part of it, and in that quick service restaurant, it's a tight knit community, and what happens to McDonald's is probably going to happen to Burger King and Yum Brands, with KFCs and that kind of stuff. So staying connected in and what they're seeing, what we're seeing, just sharing threat intel and stuff was really important. And also, McDonald's is very progressive, right? Because several years back when they started their digital transformation journey, they got into AI as well. And even in that case, I work with the privacy officer pretty closely on, okay, how do we define what our ethics is on this, right? When you're starting to track what people eat, there are things you can discover that, you may not, be looking to discover that, but you could, right? And we need to figure out, what's the grandma rule here where, your grandma wouldn't want you doing this. You shouldn't do it, right? So, you know, and they got to selective sell, or they're giving offers to certain people based off of what they eat. And I said, well, that has, it's a security issue too, because if someone gets that information, that could be detrimental if they, can figure out things about their health. So as well as sort of the ethical line of like, okay, John always gets this offer, but Tim never gets it. So what's wrong with that picture, right?
Yeah, well, it's a great segue there to part of why I was asking. These unique challenges is so many folks now are dealing with AI showing up either in the tools that they're using or in the methods that attackers are using. So all of a sudden, it's like everything. Oh, there's all this new stuff, and I've got to pivot. Even if you had kind of a very bland CISO role, if that even exists, but say you're at a company that doesn't have as much prominence, and maybe you've got this regular thing, all of a sudden there's new stuff to deal with. Do you think, like, in your mind, do you need to come up with a lot of new ways to handle this? Or do you kind of go back to maybe some evergreen principles that you say, hey, I apply this kind of ideology regardless of whether I'm dealing with a McFlurry machine or AI? Or is it, no, you've got to really be flexible and adjust your framework to fit with these new challenges that are developing?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I saw, in the industry how, of course, AI has been around for a long time. Gen AI and its current iteration has been around, maybe 2.5 years. And I saw back in, the end of 2022, 2023, that, the security industry started to take interest in this, right? Because, all of a sudden you have all these new processes that are connecting into data, and no one's really regulating what's happening here. And the knee-jerk reaction that I saw in the industry was like, block it all. We don't have a necessarily established business process for this, so why are we allowing it in? And of course, trying to block everything is, I think, a futile effort, right? Because you will never block it all. There'll be another version of it someplace, tomorrow that your scanner or firewall is not going to catch. So you might as well get people to understand and be educated on what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and and take that route and trying to understand what the right guardrails are, particularly when it comes to sensitive data, which is at the root of a Gen AI, right? It's all about the data at the end of the day. So there's safe ways to experiment and try to understand this, and then there's more riskier ways. And you have to go on kind of an educational drive, because at least back then there weren't enough tools to help you do anything otherwise other than block it and not allow it at all, right? So so that became important, to me, and I started to see other folks kind of build these sort of governance models around AI first, right? Just to kind of establish what's the policies and rules, and how we're going to play in this new playground that we've got. And even though I may not be able to enforce the policy in the way I want people to understand, why it's inappropriate for certain types of activities to occur, why you shouldn't use the internal data to train a open AI model that's out there on the internet. And, what does that mean? Just so you understand that, right? And then you finally get to the point where you have approved sort of AI platforms and those that we consider, riskier that are unapproved, and we're going to block those. And if you need access to them, then, there's a permission process to do that. But the general rules and how, we connect these things to our data always stay in place. And now, you evolve now. You've got some really great solutions out there to kind of help you assess data leakage via LLMs. And, there's frameworks now that have come out, like the top LLM. CSA has a framework. NIST has an AI framework. So you've got kind of some structure you can start to put to this to kind of understand your risk a lot better than you did, just 2 years ago.
Well, I like too that you started with the point of like, it begins with education, and you kind of, all the way back with the antivirus, like, hey, let's get people educated on what this is. Let's give them some access so they know, as kind of a throughput of, when there's change or something unknown, education's such a vital part of that. And I saw recently you just were doing some educating, wrote an article around non-human identity attacks. And I've heard a ton of people talking about identity access management and the importance of that, but I actually haven't heard so much around specifically this area of non-human identity attacks. And would love to hear a little bit about why you think this is an area that people need to be paying attention to now.
Yeah, it's really, critical. And, in my roles, I felt, several challenges around what is now termed non-human identities. I think we called them machine identities before. And they're basically identities that are not tied to a human being, and they're part of every environment. They are the connective glue in many cases that allow applications to connect to other applications. And we've had them for years. It's kind of like old wine in new bottles is what I call it. So, you talk to a CISO or anybody in the security community, they will tell you there's always been problems with service and process accounts. Interactive service and process accounts are found in just about every, audit that goes on every year. And there's no silver bullet that has ever solved that. There's plenty of privileged access management tools that are out there. You can, vault these things and keep them in, but there's so much that's being created that it's hard to keep up with. And now, because we've gone through this revolution where, just about everybody is processing 90% of their workloads in the cloud, it's created a whole new volume of non-human identities that people did not think about before. So now you got to think about things like webhooks, API tokens, regular tokens. You've got secrets. These are all ways that are allowing some application or some asset to talk to another asset, and they have to log into something for that to happen, right? So, and for I think it was Gartner came up with this figure, every 1,000 employees you have in your environment, there are at least 40,000 non-human identities in the environment. So you just imagine, the swarm that is going on in most people's environments that they don't even realize that's happening. And threat actors know this now. It's becoming a much more likely threat vector that they'll find, some non-human identity that may be part of your AWS instant, and that's their pathway in, and it's their pathway to move laterally, right? And so, you've got to first, discover where are they all at, right? What's my inventory, right? Which is not something we're very good at in this industry. Is this asset management? Let me talk to the person who has solved asset management. I want to hear from that person. I have never heard from them before. So you got to go in and do that in an inventory, and then you got to go through and prioritize. Okay, what's the risk? Which of these are actually exposed out into the internet? Which of them are tied to GitHub? Which are kind of hard coded into my environment, through some development repository. And then, after you kind of done that prioritizing risk, you've got to have a governance model to, remove and eliminate the ones that, don't provide value to anymore. So they're not just sitting around and creating risk for it. So you've got to have a life cycle model for that.
I mean, you do an audit at a places, and it's amazing how much you find backlog that nobody even knew was just sitting around everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. And I've had challenges with them in the past, and that's why I'm definitely an industry advocate for addressing this, because to me it is the biggest security blind spot, right? That most people don't address. And there's definitely a perception that, hey, I invest in enterprise tools like CyberArk, and I've got Microsoft Azure AD protection. I've got all this great stuff. Aren't I protected? And the short answer to that is no, you're not, because they don't address these things in a holistic way, right? So, if you get a PAM, maybe you are addressing, your servers and process accounts. If you've got kind of a vault manager, maybe you're addressing secrets in some way, but you still have all the other non-human identities that are out there and exposed.
Yeah, and needing to like stitch together all of those tools to understand where there's this lateral movement maybe possible or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where, I've been working with Astrix Security now, for the last 6 or 7 months. And, I help them on the product side, and, how a product like this can easily fit into a enterprise security stack, and, what's the messaging. So, because there's education needs to happen, I think, in the CISO community on why this is important, and, how you get in front of this. And it's so funny. It reminds me, like years ago, I deployed the latest McAfee product in my environment when I was at Dell, and I was so proud of myself and the partnership we had with McAfee, and that got all out. And I swear it might have been a quarter later, my guys came to me and said, "Hey, we've got a lot of malware in this." I said, "What are you talking about? I've got the latest and greatest McAfee agent out there, deployed on 100,000 stations, and if I do have it, it should be taken care of." And they're like, "No, we just met this vendor that came in. We did a proof of concept, and they found that, McAfee's missing 40% of the malware in the environment."
Oh, no.
And that product happened to be FireEye, right? And then FireEye became a staple, right? Because even though you had standard AV, it wasn't enough. And I see this same thing kind of happening in this whole non-human identity space, where you're going to realize, wow, this problem is bigger than I ever thought. I need something that's going to help me manage it. And Astrix was one of the first companies to get into this space, and they helped actually define non-human identities with Gartner as a category.
Oh, nice. Yes. And the reason we're hearing so much about this, just to kind of circle back there, is the scale you're saying. Like, now that so much is on the cloud, as you said, this existed before machine identities, whatever, but now you've done that digital transformation, and you're we're all up there, and all of a sudden realizing, like, oh, actually there's this huge new risk that we aren't properly assessing.
Well, and the other part to this too, which is really interesting, one of the other dirty secrets in in security and just in the industry in general is third parties, right? Third parties present more risk to you than anybody else, right? So, and now in this day and age, most of these third parties are coming in through some non-human identity.
Wow.
And they're connected.
Wow.
Somebody in your business unit is, got a relationship with some company, and, they need access to this data share somewhere in your AWS unit. And guess what? They're connecting it through some token.
Yeah, I need some temporary elevated privileges, and we forget to lower them down for this machine. And then now all of a sudden.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, we got to, deploy this. And in order to do that, it's going to create 10,000 identities that you know nothing about. And and that's a great way, and why I suggest to people, in using tools like this, you can actually identify third parties you didn't even know about.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Tim. I would love to talk to you more. This has been fascinating, but thank you for coming on. Before I let you go, anything you want to pitch, or how can folks meet you? What's going on that you'd like to give a shout out to our audience?
Excuse me. I would say, connect with me on LinkedIn. Very active on the platform. And, in addition to what I do in the cyber world, I'm also an angel investor. And so I look at a lot of different solutions out there. I comment on those things. I also sit on a couple of boards, and I mentor several CISOs and just provide advice on, how to learn from mistakes I made in my career so you don't make them. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. It's been such a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Take care.
This podcast is made possible by Paladin Cloud, an AI-powered prioritization engine for cloud security. DevOps and security teams often struggle under the massive amount of notifications they receive. Reduce alert fatigue with Paladin Cloud. Using generative AI, the model risk scores and correlates findings across your existing tools, empowering teams to identify, prioritize, and remediate the most important security risks. If you'd like to know more, visit paladincloud.io. Thank you for tuning in to Cyber Sentries. I'm your host, John Richards. This has been a production of True Story FM. Audio engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Amit Sagi. You can find all the links in the show notes. We appreciate you downloading and listening to this show. Take a moment and leave a like and review. It helps us to get the word out. We'll be back December 11th right here on Cyber Sentries.